In this video, I will explain the true prophetic reason why Buffalo Bills player DAMAR Hamlin collapsed onto the football field. Also, in God's signs, the football president, Gerald Ford, the only president to have never been elected vice president or president, and a president who in 1976 announced a program to have every person in America take a thing, is an extremely important prophecy from the Christian God of the Bible that is predicting that Barack Obama will become the unelected 51st vice president on March 6th, 2024, and then become the 48th president, which is why the University of Michigan retired jersey number 48 in Gerald Ford's honor. It is predicted Barack Obama will become the 51st vice president after it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on February 10th. This will sound very strange, but a near-Earth asteroid on the day of a prophetic fire in Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado, where Obama held his Democrat convention acceptance speech, and his speech at Disneyland, the Magic Kingdom, and the comeback, return of Disney CEO Bob Iger, and Joe Biden's stumble on the stage in Colorado at a commencement speech for the Air Force, and President Gerald Ford's fall as he was disembarking his Air Force One plane, is a prophecy from God that is predicting that Barack Obama will return as the CEO of America, the president, after Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash. The collapse of DAMAR Hamlin onto the football field last January, and the death of the only NFL football player to have died while playing on the field in 1971, and the death of Hall of Fame player Dick Butkus on October 5th, 2023, who was standing next to the player that died on the field in 1971, and the only president to have never been elected vice president or president, Gerald Ford, who was a football star in college and was offered to play in the NFL, whose jersey number 48 was retired by the University of Michigan, which hints at the predicted 48th president, Barack Obama, and the church committee hearings, and the Yellowstone earthquake in 1959, and a plane crash into an ice cream shop in 1972 that killed 23 people, 9 of which were from the same family, and the death of Muhammad Ali on the same day that Obama delivered a commencement speech on the same stage that Biden stumbled on, and right as Obama spoke, a Thunderbird's jet crashed as it flew over Obama, and so much more that will be explained in this video is a prophecy from the Christian God of the Bible that Barack Obama will become the 51st vice president, and it is predicting that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on February 10th. And this is all part of a prophecy that is predicting that an asteroid will hit Earth on May 26th, 2024, which will fulfill Bible prophecy, and will be the date of the resurrection rapture. The date that this video was posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right. If you have the patience to bear with me as I go through this hand-sketched diagram without a lot of written information on it, if you bear with me and you go through this video with me and allow me to explain what is going on here, I guarantee you that it will be some of the most amazing information you will have learned in your entire life. And it will be a very rewarding video for you. One of the most rewarding videos you have ever watched. But also, the information in this video will be and is extremely important. In my opinion, although this video will probably be on the long side, and this is a rough sketch, in my opinion, you really don't have a choice but to listen to this video because of how important the information is. But nonetheless, it'll be amazing. This is a very important part of the big picture of prophetic signs that God is demonstrating. There will be a lot covered here. And what more can I say? You'll see as we go what I mean. All right, before we begin this most important video here, I want to get something out of the way. More understanding and knowledge has come to light regarding God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. This date here that God is pointing to, because it still is prior to this date as I am recording this, November 19th. This is not the date that it is now predicted that Barack Obama will become the 51st vice president. Now, what's very interesting here, this date here, October 5th, was the day that player number 51 died. Hall of Fame football player Dick Butkus, the player standing next to the only player that ever died in the history of the NFL on the field while he was playing a game. And I'll explain why that's very important in this video. But his number is 51, and God is using this to hint at the 51st vice president. And his death occurred on the date 10/5, which in the rest of the world outside of the US is written as 5/1. This date definitely hints at the number 51, which is why player number 51 died on this day. It is predicted that Barack Obama will become the 51st vice president on March 6th, which will be 5 months and 1 day, which hints at the number 51. After this date, October 5th, which hints at 51, which was the day that player number 51 died. And so again, from the day that player number 51 died, on the date 10/5, which hints at 51, it is 5 months and 1 day, which hints at the number 51, to the date it is predicted that the Antichrist will become the 51st vice president, Barack Obama, on March 6th, 2024. All right, in this video, this diagram also will be explaining how God's big picture of signs here, this amazing diagram that you're looking at, will be pointing to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on October 17th. God was pointing to October 17th ahead of time, this being one example, and it was a very, very important step in the trail of signs leading to the date that she will ultimately die in a plane crash. This video explains some of the amazing and important prophetic signs that the righteous Christian God of the Bible used to point to October 17th, 2023, regarding the prediction that U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. Here is the email and forensic notes document that indicate that the prediction for Harris's plane crash on October 17th, 2023 was known since July 6th, 2023. In fact, it has been known since October of 2020 that Harris will die in a plane crash so that Barack Obama can become the president again. God pointed to October 17th, ahead of October 17th, and so it was believed that Harris's predicted plane crash would be on October 17th. As explained in the Gaza explosion video, the extremely profound prophetic signs that occurred on October 17th, 10/17, revealed adding 3 sets of 7 days to reach November 7th, 11/7. The signs on 11/7 in turn revealed a trail of signs that continued on through other dates, and this trail of signs is predicted to ultimately end on February 2nd or 3rd, 2024. This trail of signs that I am referring to is explained in the must-watch Gaza explosion video. That said, October 17th was the bigger date. October 17th was supremely important, and the signs on 1017 pointed to Zechariah chapter 1, verse 17 in the Bible. The Gaza explosion video explains how the signs on 1017 pointed to Zechariah 1:17. Zechariah 1:17 was also hinted at with the date 11:7, which again was a prophetic 3 sets of 7 days after 1017. Furthermore, from 11:7, the trail of signs regarding Harris's predicted plane crash continued on to the date 1:7, and this too was another hint at Zechariah 1:17. The reason why God used October 17th, the date 1017, to point to Zechariah 1:17 is that this important prophecy in Zechariah chapter 1 in the Bible is dated. And the date of this prophecy is recorded in Zechariah chapter 1 verse 7, 1:7. And the date 1017 also hints at this. The prophet Zechariah recorded the precise date on which he received the prophecy from God. The date was the 24th day of the month of Shavat in the Hebrew calendar. This year in 2024, the 24th day of Shavat begins at sunset on February 2nd and goes to sunset February 3rd. In other words, God used many different profound trails of signs to lead to October 17th, 2023, in order to point to the 24th day of the month of Shavat, which in 2024 begins on February 2nd. On February 2nd, Kamala Harris will visit South Carolina, the 8th state to join the Union. To learn more about the very important prophetic relevance of Harris's visit to the 8th state, watch the important and must-watch Amelia Earhart prophecy video. 8 days after Harris will visit the 8th state will be February 10th, the date on which it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, which will be the anniversary of the shoot-down of the Israeli F-16 fighter jet over northern Israel by Iran and Syria on February 10th, 2018, which was the 24th day of the month of Shavat in 2018. To confirm his signs, patterns, and connections, God pairs the numbers 44 and 23 together, as the Antichrist is the 44th president and the basketball president who wore jersey 23 in high school. Barack Obama will become the president again as a result of the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. 8 days from Harris's visit to the 8th state is the equivalent of 4 plus 4 days, which hints at the number 44. February 10th will be exactly 2 times 3 years after the Israeli F-16 fighter jet was shot down, and 2 times 3 years hints at the number 23, and the F-16 hints at 4 times 4 and the number 44. What I am also saying is that it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on October 17th. And by the way, if you are listening to this video and not watching it and looking at the diagram, I'll do my best to say the dates, but I do recommend watching the video so you can see what I am pointing to. So it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on October 17th, 2023, and when this comes to pass, this will prove all of what I'm saying in this video is true and is from God. That is the point of the prediction. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove everything that I am saying in this video, including all of the points and dates and prophetic signs that I will be explaining. As you can see, there is a ton of prophetic signs that I will be explaining in this video, and all of it will be proven to be true. And it will be proven that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections when the prediction comes to pass. And that is the purpose of the prediction that is from God, to prove this. This is how Bible prophecy works. 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy for the purpose of God proving it. Also, it is predicted that Barack Obama will become the 51st vice president after Harris's death in a plane crash on November 19th, 2023. Okay, and also, as a result of all of this, well, not as a result, but what God is also saying is all in this big picture of signs in this diagram, is that it is also confirming what was previously known, is that May 26th, 2024 will be the date of the asteroid hit of Earth that will fulfill prophecy in Revelation chapter 8. And so why don't we begin there? Because we have to begin somewhere, and that's the nature of the big picture of signs. It's interconnected, and so you can take an infinite number of pathways through the big picture of signs, which is the same as with the Bible, and that's why it is the case. The Bible is like this. One cannot understand the Bible through isolating passages, or it's not a linear document. It's interconnected, and it's infinite. And so anyway, we have to start somewhere. And since we are looking at this predicted date of the asteroid, which will also be, by the way, the date of the rapture, when God's faithful will be rescued from the severe persecution of the Antichrist. Okay, May 26th, 2024 will be 33 weeks and 3 days, which is symbolic of Christ. And that isn't... Okay, so there'll be more to be explained why you'll see as we go why this is true. Okay, and so that's a little on the light side as compared to the other information you will be receiving in this video as being solid. All right. However, Christ is symbolized by 333. Now, this was the date October 5th, 2023, which was yesterday. This diagram was put together this morning. I realized that it isn't possible to make this into a neat diagram. There's just way too much. So it has to be this pencil diagram. This was the day, October 5th, 2023, that 80-year-old Dick Butkus died. Dick Butkus was a Hall of Famer football player, one of the most famous football players in history, a famous linebacker for the Chicago Bears. He played in 8 Pro Bowls, okay? And his name in simple English gematria equals 11 times 11. The asteroid is described, the hit of the asteroid is described in Revelation chapter 8:11. That's why Ditbutkus' name hints at the number 11, and we have another 11 sign on this day, as I will explain. But that's also why he died at the age of 80 and was invited to 8 Pro Bowls. It hints at Revelation 8:11. Furthermore, in English gematria, which, by the way, if you don't know what gematria is, Hebrew, Roman, and Greek letters are also numbers, and as such, they can be converted into names and words and a numeric value. And when we do this with simple English gematria, Dick Butkus equals 121, which is 11 times 11. And it's in English gematria equal to 726, which is God's number that he uses to symbolize the rapture, because the 726th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word rapture. And as I am saying, this death of his hints at Revelation 8:11, and it connects with this 33 weeks and 3 days to the date of the asteroid and the rapture. Okay? And, well, okay. Well, so arguably 33 weeks and 3 days also hints at 333, which is 111 times 3. But God frequently repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. So we arguably have an 11 number connection here. In other words, 111 plus 111 plus 111 is hinted at. However, let's move on, because also on this day, the Chicago Bears played in a football game, which is a coincidence because it was a Thursday night and there is only one game in the NFL on Thursday. Most of the games occur on Sunday. So it just so happened that the Chicago Bears were playing on the day that this most famous Chicago Bear died. So they played in the nationally televised Thursday night game against the team from Washington State, D.C., which is hinting at Barack Obama, the Antichrist in Washington, D.C. Okay? Now, in this game, the first score of the... Let's get this out of the way. The first score of the game, and God uses first scores in games in his signs, and God uses sports. By the way, if you're new to this channel and you don't know, God frequently uses sports signs. And if you're confused, well, why in the world would God use sports? Because for perhaps you are not a sports fan. It doesn't matter if you are a sports fan or not. God frequently uses sports signs a lot. The reason being is that it is a great way to communicate information. There's so much symbolism that can be communicated in a sports game. There's all kinds of numbers for one thing, and numbers contain symbolic meaning. And God has the ability to provide all sorts of symbolic information through numbers in a game. Furthermore, there's all kinds of other symbolism, including the team, players that stand out in a game, as I will be talking about, for example, in this case, also the cities that they're from, etc. It just goes on. Furthermore, a lot of people are into sports. If you aren't, a lot of people are. It doesn't matter if you aren't. Furthermore, I'm not necessarily a big sports follower. I don't have time for that. And I think also being a sports nut is in a way a sin, because you're wasting your time watching sports all the time, right? But that doesn't mean that God can't use sports signs. So enough said. So the first score in the game was by the quarterback with a pass to number 1 with a pass to number 2, which hinted at 12. That's why that confirms the 12 days between this date and the predicted date that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, October 17th, 12 days later. Okay? 12 is also 2 times 2 times 3, which hints at 223, which is the 48th prime number, and Barack Obama will become the 48th president and the Antichrist in Washington, D.C. And this game, again, was against Washington, and it was with Chicago, where Barack Obama is from. Okay, now, this number 11. So, well, let's just finish off with number 2 here. Speaking of Barack Obama, this player, number 2, caught 3 touchdowns, which hinted at 2 and 3 and 23. 2 and 3 also hints at 2 divided by 3, which equals 0.666, and the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy is 666. This is why Barack Obama, the basketball president, wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school, and will become the president again in 2023. It is symbolic of the Antichrist in that way. Also, it is the 9th prime number, 23, and God pairs 9 and 23 together to confirm the signs and connections, but also the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, as from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. 45 is the 9th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 9th row is 45. But also, 45 hints at the number 9, 4 plus 5. It is a multiple of 9, okay, as well. So this number, in other words, can in God's signs symbolize the number 9, and God pairs 9 and 23 together to confirm the signs and connections. All right, and I've explained that probably too many other times, and we want to maybe limit the time in this video, so I won't play the clip explaining 9 and 23 and why they're paired together again. But the basketball president who wore 23 became president in 2009. All right, and also Michael Jordan wore 23 and 45. He retired briefly after winning 3 championships and then came back after a year and won another 3 championships, which is symbolic of Barack Obama, who also wore 23 and is also from Chicago, just like Michael Jordan, the GOAT, greatest of all time, which is in the Bible, GOAT is Antichrist symbolism. And the coming back after the 3 and winning another 3 is symbolic of how Barack Obama will have left the office and come back, having skipped the 45th presidency. The only president to serve non-consecutive terms skipped the 23rd presidency. Okay, and when Jordan wore jersey number 45, when he came back, it was for coincidentally 23 games. And in the last game that he played as a Chicago Bull against the team from the 45th state, he scored 45 points, wearing jersey 23. And again, the reason why is these 2 numbers hint at the 2 presidencies that will have been skipped. Okay, so you know, that's why this is important, that player 2 scored 3 touchdowns. It also pairs with this 45, which is a symbolic 9, and that's how God's signs works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And when we think about it, one way in which he would provide a second witness for us, a simple way, would be to pair certain numbers together, such as 9 and 23. And I know this because I've been studying God's big picture of signs and connections and patterns for more than full-time hours from morning until night, nonstop, for 6 years. And so that's how it works. That's how he confirms the signs and connections, through pairing 9 and 23 together. All right. Now, this player's name is DJ Moore. The prophetic Al Michaels, God has used Al Michaels in other signs, and he was the broadcaster for the game. He said that this player was having a career's worth in one night. This guy had a really big night, in other words. And his name in simple English gematria equals 80. We have another 8 there, which confirms that this player and his game for the Chicago Bears was on the same night as the Chicago Bear died at 80 years old. That's astounding. Okay, this was the standout player of the night on the same day that the 80-year-old Chicago Bear died, Dick Butkus, who played in 8 Pro Bowls. Okay, so there is another stunning confirmation. Furthermore, this 8 in this simple English gematria name pairs with or confirms the simple English gematria for Dick Butkus, which is 11 times 11, which again hints at Revelation 8:11. Okay, now, as I was saying, this player's score of number 2, who scored 3 touchdowns, hints at Barack Obama, who wore jersey 23 and will become the 48th president. That's why in his name in English gematria equals 480. It hints at 48. He had a total of 230 yards, receiving yards. Okay, he didn't score these yards. It's not the correct term. He had a total of 230 receiving yards, is how they would say it. Okay, so that's astounding because, of course, that hints at 23 and is a second witness to the 3 touchdowns for player number 2. Another 23. Amazing. Okay, and again, this 230 yards pairs with the 45, which hints at the number 9, which makes it a pairing of 9 and 23, which is how God's signs works. Okay. All right. Now, the only other player to score a touchdown in the game was player 85. This is amazing. He had 42 receiving yards. The tight end, player number 45 for the Chicago Bears, scored the other touchdown for the Bears. And that's amazing because the 85 Bears are extremely important in God's signs. The 1985 Bears. And the story of the 85 Bears involves the Dolphins, which is why we have this extremely prophetic Miami Dolphins game 11 days before the 80-year-old who had been in 8 Pro Bowls died, which is another 8 and 11 connection. Okay? So this confirms, furthermore, this was the day that the first ever piece of an asteroid was dropped off on Earth by the probe. NASA, years ago, I forget when, sent a probe to go to an asteroid and collect a sample and then return it to Earth. The returned sample landed on Earth on this date. Okay? And we have 11 days to the symbolic 8 here, the big news about Dick Butkus dying at the age of 80, who had been in 8 Pro Bowls. That's another 8 and 11. And this asteroid sign connects, goes on to connect to the asteroid that will hit Earth. This asteroid fell to Earth, this piece of the asteroid fell to Earth, and then we have a straightforward connection to the date it is predicted that the asteroid will hit Earth, described in Revelation 8:11. So this is amazing. And we still haven't gotten to the number 11 sign, which is Moony. And God uses moon signs, but the moon is a giant rock in space. And this is hinting at that. His name, Moony. It's a very clever way for God to play on how he uses frequently in his signs, moon signs. Because watching for the timing of the Lord, because watching for the timing of the moon in the Bible is very important, and it symbolizes watching for the timing of the Lord's return, which includes many moon signs. And the sun symbolizes God the Father, and the sun's light reflected off of the moon. We can't, but the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. Hence, watching the moon is symbolic of watching for the timing of Christ through his prophetic signs, his end times signs that are indicating his return. And furthermore, this is the date of his return, the rapture, 33 weeks and 3 days later. All right, now he scored 3 touchdowns. And that, in my opinion, is a confirmation of the 33 weeks and 3 days. It's a big deal. He scored 3 touchdowns. He, in the camera for the nation to see, held up his 3 fingers, celebrating how he had scored 3 touchdowns. Okay? It's a big deal. And he is asteroid symbolism because he's a Chicago Bear and his name equals 8 or 80. And it connects with the 11 days to the Dolphins. And the Dolphins and the 85 Bears are intertwined, as I will now explain. Okay, so that's why the number 85 scored the other touchdown. And 42, because the number 42 in the Bible is mentioned 7 times as symbolic of the Antichrist's period, which is why God's faithful will be raptured. So it connects with the rapture. Okay, so also, by the way, the 42 months is also mentioned when the dragon, which is symbolic of the Antichrist, is thrown down from heaven to earth with his angels. And that is arguably symbolism also, or the other way around, if you will, the asteroid falling to earth. But let's get back to this reason why the number 85 is important regarding the Chicago Bears and the Dolphins, and why these 2 signs are separated by 11 days. Well, they're separated by 11 days to hint at Revelation 8:11. But the reason why they connect is this. The 85 Bears were arguably the best team in history because they had a revolutionary style of defense that the other team's offenses could not understand and compete in that year. The offense is caught up, and that didn't last forever. But for 1 year, the 85 Bears completely dominated every team that they played, except for one team, the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins destroyed them on a Monday night game, nationally televised game. And I was a Miami Dolphins fan as a kid at the time, and it was the only game that I ever recorded. The only thing I ever recorded, perhaps. We had the ancient beta cassette players, if you know what I mean, and had one blank tape, and I, recorded the game. So anyway, that's a personal connection, and I'm sure it was designed by God so that I could understand and tell you this right now. The 85 Bears lost one game in the season, and had they not, they would have had a perfect record. The only team to have a perfect record were the Dolphins in 1972. So it just so happened to be that the Dolphins were the team that beat the Bears, and they were the only team with a perfect record. Furthermore, the coach, the legendary Hall of Fame coach, Don Shula, coached both teams, the Dolphins in 72 and 85, 13 years apart. And that's the big thing. Barack Obama, the Antichrist, hosted the Bears at the White House on the Day of Atonement. Not only was it the Day of Atonement, it was in the Gregorian calendar, October 7th, 10/7. And in the Hebrew calendar, the Day of Atonement is the 10th day of the 7th month. So in both calendars, it was a symbolic Day of Atonement in the Gregorian calendar, but it was actually the Day of Atonement. The reason why I know of the symbolic Gregorian, because God has used other signs on the date 10/7 to symbolize the Day of Atonement in other years. But this year, they both lined up, which is amazing. Now, the Dolphins, they beat the Bears. The one game that they lost was in week number 13, and it was because of the quarterback for the Dolphins, number 13. His quick passing offense was enough to overcome the Bears' defense that year. And the year that the 85 Bears, the year that they lost in week 13 to quarterback number 13, was 13 years after the Dolphins' perfect season. And when the Dolphins won the Super Bowl, the MVP was player number 13. And the reason for all of that is because when the Bears came to visit the Antichrist at the White House, Barack Obama hosted them because he moved to Chicago in 1985, and he was a Chicago Bears fan. And in those days, teams didn't visit the White House after they won a championship. So because they had never been, Barack Obama decided to host them at the White House, which ended up being controversial because the Dolphins then complained, well, how come we haven't been to the White House? And so Barack Obama then hosted the 72 Dolphins at the White House and made a joke about it too. And so anyway, the day that they came to the White House on October 7th, 2011 was exactly 13 years before the Day of Atonement in 2024, the day that the Antichrist will be defeated at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. And the prediction being made in this video will prove that what I have just said is true. Matthew 24:36 is mistranslated and misinterpreted, the most quoted passage in the Bible. If I can know the date of the plane crash, you can rest assured that God is revealing the date of the second coming as well. Furthermore, the big picture of science is an interconnected web, and at the center of the web is the second coming. None of this is true if the second coming isn't on October 12th, 2024, in other words. All right? Now, but that's amazing, the 13 years connection, and the reason why all of the Dolphins and the number 13 is because of that. So that's why the 85 Dolphins and why the connection to the the 85 Bears and number 85 in this sign right here, which connects to the Dolphins. Now, on this day, the Dolphins scored a record 70 points. Well, actually, they could have beaten the record. The record is 72 points, hinting at the 72 Dolphins, the 1972 Dolphins. It's amazing. The team that scored 72 points in a game was in 1966, hinting at the 66th book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, in which the Antichrist is, his number is said to be 666. And that team was the team from Washington, the Washington Redskins. Okay, and so that's hinting at the Antichrist in Washington, D.C. And so anyway, the Dolphins, though, decided that they preferred not to beat the record out of respect for the other team. They could have, But instead, they kneeled at the end of the game and ran out the clock instead of kicking another field goal and, extending the game. They didn't need to score another point, and so they didn't, out of respect for the other team. So they scored 70 points, which is prophetic. It's hinting at the 70th week in the most central prophecy in the Bible in Daniel chapter 9. There's this 70 weeks prophecy, and that's divided into a 69 period followed by the 70th period, which is symbolic of the end times and the Antichrist. That's why this game was exactly 9 years. This is a typo in the diagram. This 9 years should extend all the way to this date right here. It was exactly 9 years after Barack Obama spoke at the opening of the General Assembly of the United Nations, the 69th General Assembly. The 69th General Assembly connects with 9 years to this number 70. And again, in that prophecy regarding the Antichrist and his period, it's a 69 weeks period followed by the 70th week period. That's why this is astounding. The number 9 is the most important number in his signs, and it symbolizes God's judgment, and that's why this 9 years. But I'll further confirm this with this 42 years, because that's how God's signs works. It works on the principle of second and third multiple witnesses, confirming a matter, as I explained. But this date that he spoke on the 69th UN General Assembly was also the day of the prophetic 2 cows with the number 7 on their head. Now, the number 7 on the head of the cows was symbolic of the 2 sets of 7 cows in the King of Egypt's dream. The King of Egypt is Antichrist symbolism, interpreted by Joseph, which was interpreted to symbolize the 7 years of famine preceded by the 7 years of prosperity. But the 7 years of famine is symbolic of the end times period of the Antichrist. And so that's why the 7 cow was born at the same time as Obama spoke at the 69th UN, because the Antichrist will lead a world body, the UN most likely, if not a new incarnation of it, but whatever. And that's why the 7 symbolizes the 7 years following the 69th week, because the 70th week is a symbolic 7 years, which we are already well inside of, which began in 2017. And the prediction in this video, when it comes to pass, will prove it, what I just said. The second coming is in 2024, as I just explained. Okay, so there you have, so back to here. But by the way, before I move on, I forgot to mention there was a sign hidden in here that I didn't get to yet, which was that, before that, though, I didn't even finish up here yet. Okay, let's just take it one step at a time. So God uses firsts in his signs, the first score, as I was saying. The first score, in general, he uses firsts in his signs, which including first scores. But the first touchdown in this game was from player number 1, just like this player number 1 in the first touchdown in this game. This was also player number 1, and his touchdown to player number 10, who also had a big day, just like player 2 had a big day. Player 1 and player number 10 hint at 11, which confirms this 11 days connection. All right. Now, the last play of the game, because God uses the symbolic lasts as well of prophetic games. The last big play for the Dolphins. Oh, this big touchdown pass, which was a big play. It was a long play. I forget how many yards, but the play was possible because of a superior block that the player named Isaiah made. Okay, and that hinted at Isaiah chapter 35, because the last player to have a big play, which put the Dolphins in scoring position to break the record, was player number 35. So this hints at Isaiah chapter 35. Why does it hint at Isaiah chapter 35? Because in Isaiah chapter 35, God speaks of the quote-unquote highway of holiness. And this is symbolic of the rapture, which is why the rapture will be exactly 35 weeks after this, on the day of the asteroid hit, and that's why this was on the day of the asteroid that came from the probe that landed on Earth, the piece of the asteroid. It's amazing. What I just said is amazing. It's exactly 35 weeks from this Isaiah 35 prophetic sign. It's just amazing. Okay, so this is amazing confirmation that the asteroid and the rapture will be on this day. Because again, Isaiah chapter 35 is symbolic of the rapture. All right. If you have the eyes to see it, 70 is 2 times 35. So it's a hint at that. It's the second coming of 35. But anyway, I won't press that. But so we didn't finish up here because we also have the Mooney sign as well, which confirms the 11 days, as I mentioned. But before we do that, Trump was a prophetic sign on this day. Trump is God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs. And God uses Trump for his border wall of security symbolism. And I'll just play a clip explaining how Trump is synonymous with the border wall of security. President Trump is God's trumpet that he uses to highlight and confirm his signs. The word trump in archaic English means trumpet or the sounding of a trumpet. Donald Trump was born on a Sabbath day, and the portion of Torah that was read in synagogues on the day that Trump was born was the passage from the book of Numbers, in which God commanded the making of trumpets. Trump was born exactly 23 months, which happens to be exactly 700 days before Israel was reborn. And God used Trump in prophetic signs regarding the restoration of Israel. Donald Trump chose his running mate, Mike Pence, and their two names, Trump-Pence, hints at trumpets. Trump's presidency, including his election campaign, was synonymous with his border wall of security. Before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment on ancient Jericho, the Hebrews blew trumpets. Before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment on the ancient city of Jericho, the Hebrews marched around Jericho's walls of security 7 times over 7 days, while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. This was a 3 sets of 7. In the book of Revelation, which describes God's judgment in the end times period, there are also 3 sets of 7 judgments. When the Hebrews blew the trumpets at Jericho, it was an announcement from God of judgment on the city of Jericho. Likewise, President Trump's presidency was an announcement of judgment on the nation of America, God's Gentile nation and the only other nation in history besides Israel that was founded on a relationship with God. This is why President Trump's election campaign and presidency were synonymous with his border wall of security, and why on the first day of his presidency, on Inauguration Day, President Trump was exactly 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old, which was 3 sets of 7 and paralleled the 3 sets of 7 in the book of Joshua. Through the symbolic very beginning of Trump's presidency, God announced judgment on the nation. Joshua, the leader of the Hebrews, led them around the walls of security 7 times over 7 days, while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. On the day that President Trump was elected by 77 electoral votes, the leader of Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, had been in power for exactly 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. On this day, Trump had particularly a lot to say. He usually has a lot to say, but he particularly had a lot to say on this day with his tweets. And he talked about his border wall of security. But the reason why also that's prophetic, he didn't only talk about his border wall of security on this day, which is amazing enough. But this was the day after. It was in the early morning. So technically it was on the 5th, but he was talking about the same day, kinda, which was the day before, which was when Biden announced that the news came out that he was going to be building more miles of the wall. The thing that hypocritically the blue team was against when Trump was in office, right? Because their full of hate more than they are common sense, right? That's why the blue team has the spirit of Antichrist. They're full of hate. That's the truth about the left. They're full of hate. And so they wouldn't allow Trump to have a wall of security, which is so common sense, right? I mean, that's absurd to be against that, right? But now they're going to build more wall. But anyway, so Trump trumpeted how the news got it wrong, and that how when they said that he had built 450 miles of wall, which is because he's the 45th, which is confirmation because it's Trump we're talking about, and he's the 45th president, and he's God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs. But also, this 450 miles prophetic trumpeting of Trump confirms the 45 days to the walls of security collapsing on America when Obama will become the 51st vice president. All right. But also, Trump corrected the news stories. This is amazing. He corrected them and said that his wall, the amount of miles that he had built, is 560. That is jaw-dropping. I didn't know that, actually, because the number 56 is 7 plus 7 times 7. It's a 3 sets of 7. But not only is it a 3 sets of 7 that parallels the book of Joshua, as I just explained, it's actually more accurate because the Israelites marched around once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. It was actually a 7 and then a 7 times 7, which is what 56 is. And so that's amazing. But it's also the Omer count, by the way, the 7 symbolic days between Passover and the Feast of First Fruits, then 7 times 7 days. And if you read it, in my opinion, correctly, the timing of the walls of security collapsing on Jericho was on Pentecost at the end of the 7 times 7 days. And God has proven that with his signs. That's how I know that. But anyway. So what about Mooney? Okay, so this player Mooney, he should have scored a touchdown, but there was pass interference that wasn't controversially called by the referee. The referee missed the call. The sportscasters, including the prophetic Al Michaels sportscaster, solidly confirmed that it is true that he should have gotten a pass interference call. All right, so that's symbolic of, you know what, the interference, the shoplifted referendum from the 45th president, right? That's what we're talking about here. It's conjunction with this. This is a moon sign, furthermore. Oh, and Trump was born on a prophetic moon, by the way. And also, he delivered his prophetic State of the Union speech on the super blue blood moon on January 31st, 2018. Well, it's 33 days to the date it is predicted that President Trump will die from a heart attack. It could very well be that this is actually a valid connection here. We do have a Trump sign. This is a walls of security sign collapsing. He's talking about his wall of security and mentioning these prophetic numbers. This is huge. And we have the 3 touchdowns. It could be confirmation for the 33 days. But anyway, it's predicted that Trump will die on November 7th, 2023. Let's get into this Mooney sign. So there's pass interference, okay? Mooney. Now why? There's more to Mooney, which I'll explain now in another diagram. God has used this number 11 Mooney player. The moon sign gives it away. I mean, the name moon hints at the moon, as I was explaining earlier. Now, the interference call, what confirms the prophetic significance of the play and this Mooney sign in this game, is that the interference call came when the score was at 17-3. 17-3 is extremely important, and this is what a big part of what I'm going to be getting at in this video, which is why Barack Obama will become the 51st vice president also, because 51 is 3 times 17, which is why the interference call came with the score at 17-3. Okay, and again, this game connects to the date Barack Obama will become the 51st vice president, as I have been explaining, right? It came on the day of this Trump sign when he talked about 450 miles of wall, for example. And again, 45 hints at 9, and we are talking about player number 11. And Dick Butkus's name means 11 times 11. So the 11 and 9 confirm each other, right? And that gets us to the date. And why is that? Because 9 and 11 pair together, because obviously it hints at the 9/11 judgment warning in 2001, which is also why Barack Obama will become the vice president, return to the White House on the date 11/19, November 19th. The reason why is this date hints at 9/11, when the walls of security will collapse. But the big thing here is that he will be the 51st vice president. And as I said earlier, God repeats a number 3 times frequently in his signs for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. But in this case too, the number 17 is important. But this also hints at 3 times 17. 51 is 3 times 17. And that's what's hinted at with this score of 17-3 at the time of this interference call for Mooney. But I will back that up with the prophetic significance of Mooney in a second with this other diagram. But the reason for 3 times 17 is that it hints at 317. Let's move into the other diagram. Well, it's right here, actually. This is so important. The 317th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word meaning by way of compulsion, unwillingly, by force, which is the perfect word that summarizes the mark of the Antichrist. And taking the mark of the Antichrist, the thing, and you know what I'm talking about, the thing that you can't talk about is the mark of the Antichrist, which people will be forced to take unwillingly by compulsion. Sorry, past tense, have been forced to take it by compulsion. All right, but it'll get much worse. The pressure will get much worse than it already has been, because ultimately soon food will be rationed and will be only given to those who take the mark of the Antichrist, the thing. The lesser citizens will not be allowed to buy the rationed food. This will be enforced through digital programmable currency. All right, that's why the Antichrist is coming to power in a few days, so that this can happen. But it's all about by way of compulsion, which is what 317 means, and that's why 51 hints at that. If you have wisdom, you know that God repeats a number 3 times. 51 is 3 times 17, and that hints at 317. And that is why this 317 months connection, which I will explain, and why this 51 years connection, which I will explain. And let's go now to the diagram that I was talking about regarding Mooney. Now, the reason why God was pointing to Mooney is Mooney broke the record for a rookie for the Chicago Bears. And again, the Chicago Bears points to Barack Obama, who is from Chicago, moved to Chicago during the 85 Bears, as I mentioned. Well, this Mooney player for the Bears broke the record for the rookie by scoring 46 or catching 46 receptions in a season. And what are the 85 Bears known for? Their defense. But the defense had a name, the 46 defense, right? And that was a hint at the 46th presidency, during which the Antichrist will come to power, the 46th president who will step down, right? But he beat this other rookie's, the previous record was 45 catches. So that's another confirmation of the 45 days. The 45 days connection from this Mooney sign right here, okay? Player number 11, as I explained, right? So that's more confirmation of that. The previous record by a rookie was 45 catches. God did this to point to this rookie, this other player. So let's investigate the other player. First of all, the other player's number, the other player broke that, had that record in 1954. He scored the 45 catches. 54 is an inverse of 45. Both are multiples of 9 and both add up to 9. And 9 is the most important number in God's signs and judgment, big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, as it symbolizes God's judgment. And he played for Chicago, of course, as obviously, because we're talking about the Chicago record for a rookie. And Barack Obama, the Antichrist, is from Chicago. But God uses also the number 40, and the Antichrist will skip the 45th presidency. That's why 45 catches. But also 1954, because it hints at 54. And that's confirmed with the 45 catches, that it hints at that the 54 number is being hinted at. And that's because it points to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which was the first black regiment, as Obama is the first black president, the first black regiment in the Civil War, which is slavery and freedom symbolism, as is the Bible and is life, slavery and freedom. That is the theme of the Bible and life. And the Civil War as well, which is about the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. They were pivotal in winning the Civil War for the North, and the blacks fighting for the North. And but that black regiment is also known, the 54th Massachusetts Regiment is known for not receiving the equal pay that their other northern white Union soldiers were paid. The $13 that the other soldiers were paid, they weren't. They were discriminated against. It was oppressive minority laws, just as forcing people to take the thing is, and rationing food will be. And it will be through programmable currency, which is why in the 54th Massachusetts sign, the $13, it's hinting at money, which is what will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist. The $13 also hints at the 13th Amendment, which was used to abolish slavery, which is why the Dolphins and the number 13 with the 85 Bears. The 85 Bears and them losing in week 13 to player number 13 was all about how Barack Obama will use digital programmable currency, which is hinted at with the $13 with the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. But the Bears are needed to point back to the number 13 with the Dolphins, and that's why number 85 caught a pass in this game yesterday, because it hints back to the Miami Dolphins, which are about the number 13 with the 85 Bears connection, and the 13 years in between when they visited him at the White House. The number 13 in the Bible also is symbolic of the Antichrist. Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, was the 13th generation from Ham. Haman, another type for the Antichrist, was persecuted the Jews on the 13th days of the month. And the two Antichrists are described in the book of Revelation, chapter 13. But most importantly here, the Antichrist will be using programmable digital currency, which is hinted at with the $13, which is the reason for the number 13 in the Dolphins Bears sign, the 85 Bears, the year that Barack Obama moved to Chicago. And you get the idea, because I've explained it before now. So that's how important all of this is. And that's why we have the Bears connection to 1954, with the year of the 45 catches, which hints at Barack Obama also, because he will skip the 45th presidency. So, okay, now that's amazing. Now, furthermore, this player was born on the date 5/4. And God revealed all of this knowledge that I just explained about the 54th Massachusetts Regiment through the prophetic signs on the date 5/4 in 2023. And one of the must-watch videos on this channel is the 54th Massachusetts video. There's so much amazing information. It's actually 2 parts. But so he was born on the date 5/4, and that's just confirmation of the prophetic significance of the year in which he made this record for the Chicago Bears. Okay? It's amazing. And that's confirmed with the 45 catches because it's a reflection of 54. And speaking of reflections, we're going to have that in a second, because 351 months is a reflection. Well, 531 is a reflection of 351, and both of these hint at the mark of the Antichrist, as I'll explain. Okay, so Hamlin Hill is a high place. Bama in Hebrew means high place. Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Jesus in Luke 10:18 said that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying, or he knew that there would be a president named Barack Obama and said it anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he revealed the identity of the Antichrist. But Bama is important in God's signs, and the word Bama is the 1117th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is why we have this 11 months and 17 years connection to this extremely important Antichrist date, sign. All right, which I will get to in a second. I didn't even label it because it was so obvious in my mind, I forgot to. But this was the date that Barack Obama was born. And speaking of 3 times 17 equals 51, well, 351 is 3 times 117. In other words, you have the 51. If you take that away, you've got 351. 300 divided by 3 is 100. And 51 divided by 3 is 17. That's why you have 3 times 117. Now, 117 is extremely important in God's science. It is so important, I made a substantially great video, put a lot of time into making it. It's not too long, though, actually. I was going to say it's a lengthy video. It's not, actually. And what you need to do, in my opinion, is perhaps stop this video and go watch the other video and come back. The other video is titled, Harris's crash will be on 10/17 equals eclipse peaked at 1:17 p.m. The eclipse peaked at 1:17 p.m. over St. Louis, and that's one reason why it is predicted that Kamala Harris's plane crash will be in St. Louis. But long story short, you'll have to take my word for it. The number 117 is extremely important for many, many reasons, but one of them is that it symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. All right. It also symbolizes Genesis 7:11, which is when the flood judgment began, and on and on. Okay, so that's enough. But that's why this sign, which is hinting at Barack Obama, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist through rationing of food, through digital programmable currency, which is hinted at with the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. That's why this player who was born on the date 5/4, who had the Bears record in 1954, was born exactly 351 months, which is 3 times 117. This is an emphasis of the number 117. And like I said earlier, God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. This is, in other words, a huge connection, which is 100% confirmation that this is all true. And again, the player's name is Hill, and Bama means high place. Okay. Now, let's see, where to? This date is this 351 months. There's a second witness connection to it, which is that this trail of signs right here is a second witness to this trail. This straight 351 months is also, like I said, 11 months and 17 days to this date. This date, which is in turn 11 months and 4 months. Okay, but this date, the date 4/4, hints at 44 and the 44th president, and 11 times 4 equals 44, which is why we have the 11 months and 4 days connection. Furthermore, this 11 months and 4 days connection, 11 years and 4 months connection is also 4,140 days, which hints at 4 times 1 times 4. It is, in other words, it hints at a 44 as well. You have to take my word for it. But this connection also is the equivalent of 136 months, and 136 is the 16th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 16th row is 136. And God uses frequently the number 16 to hint at 4 times 4 and the 44th president. But this date here, okay, so on this date 4/4, 1950, was the day that the UN Trustee Council officially recommended that Jerusalem be made an international city, which is the biggest transgression against God in Bible prophecy that the world will seek to do in the end times, for which it will be judged. But in that effort, it will be led by the Antichrist, Barack Obama, which is why it connects to his birth date. Barack Obama was also born exactly 690 weeks after Israel was reborn. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the most central prophecy in the Bible regards a 69-week period before the end times period of the Antichrist, hence why God uses 690 weeks here. It hints at the 69 weeks in that prophecy. That's an amazing connection too. Now, the thing is also, this player's birth date connects with this 5-4 date, with 1,044 months, which hints at 144, a very prophetic, prominent number in the book of Revelation that symbolizes God's faithful who will be raptured. Okay? That's controversial for some people, but that's actually true. The 144,000 is speaking about those that will be raptured. And anyway, that's why the connection here. But this date here, that was the day of the Kentucky Derby. That was the controversial Kentucky Derby that disqualified the winner, Maximum Security, as in the walls of security collapsing in God's judgment. There was a 22-minute deliberation by the judges, which was a hint at the Supreme Court judges deliberating on the 22nd Amendment and whether or not Barack Obama can become the vice president, which they will rule that he can. He will be appointed instead of elected and overcome the 22nd Amendment's restriction on someone being elected more than twice. He will be appointed instead by his wife, Barack Obama, after Joe Biden steps down and Michelle Obama becomes the president for a few days. All right. Now, we have this theme that I'm talking about in this video, which is this 317 theme, which is also hinted at right here. Because from this, and the winner of the subsequent winner of the race was Country House, which hinted at the White House, the country's house. The name of the horse was Country House, who won because Maximum Security was disqualified, which hinted at the disqualification of President Trump. And it was the 145th Kentucky Derby, which also hinted at the 45th president, and on and on. But anyway, we have this other connection here to yesterday, October 5th, the death of Dick Butkus and the prophetic football sign and the Trump wall of security sign. Speaking of walls of security collapsing, I didn't even realize this until now. We have this connection to Trump and the walls of security collapsing here, the sign on this date, October 5th. Okay, now what is it? It's 53 months and 1 day, which hints at 531, which is the number of days in a blood moon tetrad. The blood moon tetrad is 4 blood moons in a row without any intervening ones in between them that are all landing on Hebrew calendar feast dates. And the interval in between the 4 dates is 3 sets of 177 days. And God uses combinations of 1 and 7 to hint at 100, to hint at 117. Let's just put it that way. And so this is actually symbolic 3 times 117. It really is. I mean, I know God's science to know this. I know it sounds a little far-fetched maybe for the first time when you're hearing it, but when you know what I know, it's actually true. Because I know that God uses the combinations of 1s and 7 to hint at what I just said. The symbolism contained in all of the other symbolism, including Genesis 7:11 and on and on. Make sure you watch that video I mentioned earlier. Okay, so and again, this connects to the 51st, the date it is predicted that Obama will become the 51st vice president, and 51 equals 3 times 17, which hints at G317, which means by way of compulsion, unwillingly, by force, which is referring to the mark of the Antichrist, the thing. All right. By the way, we're just getting warmed up here with this video. Hopefully you're still with me. Honestly, we're just getting warmed up. Stay with me, all right? Here we have a connection, just to round off this diagram. There's another 117 in it, so we might as well, and another 531. That's the reason for including it, just to give you a second witness to what I just set up here. The date that Barack Obama was born was on the date 8/4 was exactly 840, which hints at 84 days before Kennedy died. Kennedy died while in office. He was the 35th president. Again, God is pointing to Isaiah chapter 35. Kennedy died as his car was about to get onto the I-35, and Isaiah chapter 35, I didn't even realize that until now. The I-35 hints at Isaiah chapter 35, but it's also the highway of holiness, right, in Isaiah chapter 35, and that's why he was about to get on the I-35, the 35th president. And again, Christ symbolized by 333. He was crucified at the age of 33 and was resurrected at the age of 33. And so anyway, also on this day, 3 famous people died, including Aldous Huxley, who wrote about a dystopia involving some things that are similar to The Thing. You know what I'm talking about. That's why Aldous Huxley, it's amazing. And then C.S. Lewis was known for writing about the Trinity, hence the 333 days connection to the day that Harris was born. So the day that Barack Obama was born connects to the day that Harris was born. And she was born exactly 531 months before the inauguration of the Antichrist, the 44th president, on January 20th, 2009. She was also born, so in Bible prophecy, 1,260 days is mentioned 7 times regarding the period of the end times and the Antichrist. And that's why it's exactly 12,600 days, which is amazing because it hints at 1,260 days before the day of this mass shooting in Columbine, the Columbine massacre, which was perpetrated by a teenager named Harris and his partner in crime, who had the initials DK, Dylan Klebold. Kamala Harris's initials are DK, Kamala Devi Harris, okay? And so anyway, the mass shootings God has been using as symbolism for the thing. The things that come out of guns and go into people are symbolic of the things that come out of the thing and go into people and are massacres and is a massacre. All right. Now this is also exactly 414 months, which is also confirming this 4,140 days connection back here. Also, this is exactly 600 plus 600 plus 600 weeks, which is at 666, the number of the Antichrist. It's amazing, this connection between Harris and the shooting by Harris. Okay, so that finishes up this diagram. Now let's get into some really amazing information, some new information that you've never heard in any other video on this channel. All right, now, as I said, I'm just getting warmed up. Now, this date here, as I said, connects with 9 days to the day that Obama spoke at the 69th UN on the day of the 7 cows. 42 years because 42 months is mentioned 7 times in Bible prophecy as the period of the Antichrist. This gets us back to this prophetic date here, which was September 24th, 1976. All right, this is very important. This was the day that a plane at an air show failed to take off and crashed into an ice cream parlor. The Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor plane crash that killed 23 people, 9 of whom were from the same family. And God pairs 9 and 23 together to confirm the signs, as I mentioned earlier. So 9 from the same family, it's astounding, but there was 23 killed, and it's exactly 42 years, all right? Now this connection also, this 9 years and 42 years connection is also 51 years, which again hints at 3 times 17, which hints at 317, the word that means by way of compulsion, unwillingly, by force. That gets us back to the day of the dolphin sign, and the dolphin's sign connects with the bear sign. It's all about the number 13, which connects to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment and the enforcement of the mark of the Antichrist by way of compulsion, unwillingly, by force, through digital programmable currency, which is why the $13 in the 54th Massachusetts sign. All right, so, and that gets us to the 51st Vice President, which also hints at 3 times 17 and 317, and the word that means by way of compulsion, unwillingly, by force. Okay, so from the end, Barack Obama will become the president again through a prophetic plane crash. Kamala Harris's plane crash, predicted to be on October 17th. 35 days, by the way, before. So another 35 there, incidentally. This plane crash, yes, this plane crash crashed into the Howard Hughes room of the ice cream parlor. They named the room, they themed it, I guess, where they eat the ice cream. They named it the Howard Hughes Room. That's where they died. Oh, they were kids too. They were there because of they were kids after their baseball game enjoying some ice cream. Tragic. Many of the people that died were kids after a baseball game. Speaking of sports signs. All right, now, this plane crash, 9 of the same family that killed 23, reveals that Barack Obama will become a president again through a plane crash. But also it reveals that it will be through Joe Biden stepping down, because Joe Biden is known as Mr. Ice Cream. In fact, I believe it was on the campaign trail, he celebrated Ice Cream Day, National Ice Cream Day. But everyone knows, I think everyone knows, it's very well known that he likes to take the media on trips to the ice cream shops while wearing aviator sunglasses. I'm sure the man loves ice cream, but also it's done to present him as a sweet old man, to cover up how he is a wicked, corrupt gangster. And so anyway, which is the truth. So the aviator sunglass wearing ice cream shop lover is hinted at with this airplane crash at the air show into the ice cream shop, with 9 people dead from the same family out of 23. It's absolutely astounding. And we have this exact 51 years connection. I had previously thought, and I still believe it is valid, that 50 years would be the prophetic, and it is, okay? But it's also 51. 51 years is very prophetic, and I didn't realize before why it's so prophetic. Well, first of all, Obama will be the 51st vice president through the aviator sunglass wearing ice cream lover stepping down. All right. Now, there was also another Farrell's ice cream shop tragedy in which the disoriented old 81-year-old man injured 6 and killed 1 person for a total of 7 at an ice cream shop at a Farrell's, same store, Farrell's ice cream shop franchise store in California, same state. And Biden will step down 7 days before his 81st birthday, which is why the 1 killed and 6 injured for a total of 7 by the 81-year-old disoriented old man, and Biden will step down because he is a disoriented old man, which I knew long before he was even installed as the president that would happen. All right. Now, the date that he announced Kamala Harris as his running mate, August 11th, 2020, was exactly 2,300 days after the disoriented old man drove his SUV into the ice cream shop. And in Daniel chapter 8, a period of 2,300 days is related to the Antichrist. All right. Now, that's enough of that tangent, though. The thing is, though, the reason why this is, to going into the details, too, is that the Howard Hughes room is what connects us to this. And this is the big thing here. This is the big thing. This is where it starts to get jaw-dropping, this video. All right? This was the day that the only player in NFL history died while on the field playing a game. He just dropped dead due to a heart attack. His name was Charles Hughes, which connects with exactly 11 months to the crash into the Howard Hughes room. But God pairs numbers to confirm the signs and connections, as I explained, and that's why there were 9 from the same family that died. It pairs with the 11 months and confirms the 11 months. The 23 total confirms the 9, and the 9 confirms the 11 months. Now, this player died playing for the Lions, which hints at the lion, Christ, who will defeat the Antichrist. He was number 85, which hints at the Bears, the 85 Bears. But who were they playing that day? They were playing the Bears. But not only that, Dick Butkus was playing for the Bears. And the iconic image, the iconic photo of this player collapsed on the field, because he did so right in front of Dick Butkus, who saw him convulse violently. And in other words, Dick Butkus was right next to the player. He was the guy next to him. And he was calling to the sidelines for emergency assistance for this guy when he dropped dead in front of him. And then the iconic image of this incident is with Dick Butkus with his back facing the camera, looking down at the player on the field. And what do we see? His jersey number, 51. And I should have mentioned that a long time ago. Dick Butkus is player number 51. And this connects with 45 days to the 51st vice president. And I explained why the 45 days and the 45 catches of Hamlin Hill and all that, right? And Trump 450 miles, right? But Dick Butkus is player number 51, which is what? 3 times 17, which does what? Confirms this 51 years connection, which is 3 times 17 years, which does what? Confirm that the Antichrist will enforce the mark of the Antichrist by way of compulsion, unwillingly, by force. And what does the thing do? What does the thing cause in people? Yes, it causes them to collapse due to a you-know-what, which is what I just mentioned a minute ago as to how this person died. This player was rushed to Henry Ford Hospital. And here's where it gets astounding. Gerald Ford was the only president to never have been elected vice president or president. And that's why Gerald Ford is extremely prophetic in God's signs. Harrison Ford as well. Harrison Ford, known for his aviation mishaps, because of Benjamin Harrison and Gerald Ford, the 2 presidents. Because Kamala Harris will die due to an aviation mishap. Kamala Harris, Harrison Ford. But Benjamin Harrison was the 23rd president, and his presidency was skipped. Barack Obama will serve non-consecutive terms, the only other president to do so. And he will be the only other president to have never been elected vice president or president. Gerald Ford was appointed vice president after the scandal involving Spiro Agnew. Richard Nixon appointed him, and then Richard Nixon stepped down. Just like Joe Biden will appoint Michelle Obama and then step down, and Michelle Obama will appoint Barack Obama. So Gerald Ford was never elected, just like Barack Obama won't be elected, thus overcoming, through being appointed instead, the 22nd Amendment. Which is why this player was rushed to Henry Ford Hospital. All right, now, where do I go next? I could go one of 2 directions. Both are equally profound. What I'll do is go with Gerald Ford first, but I'll just say first, Damar Hamlin. In a few minutes, I will explain the true prophetic reason in God's signs for the death of Damar Hamlin, the Buffalo Bills player that collapsed on the field due to a thing. He suffered in his chest a thing. You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay? He collapsed onto the field and was rushed to the hospital and was in the hospital for 9 days. Which is, by the way, more confirmation of this 11 months here, because this does hint at Damar Hamlin. Because this player, Charles Hughes, he was injured in the preseason when he was playing against the Buffalo Bills. And then the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with him, so he continued to play. And then he later died. But the initial injury came against the Bills, the Buffalo Bills, the team from the 11th state, by the way. And more confirmation of the 11 months here, but okay. So I'm going to explain Damar Hamlin in a second and how this all fits into the big picture. It's amazing beyond words, but we need to establish Gerald Ford first. Now, 11 months again gets us to this date, okay? Again, confirmed by the 9 from the same family. 42 years, as I explained, gets us to Obama speaking at the 69th UN. All right, but 42 months, which is confirmed by the 42 years and vice versa. 42 months, 7 times in Bible prophecy, is mentioned as the period of the Antichrists. And 42 months exactly after this prophetic plane crash, the ice cream shop plane crash, gets us to the day that Gerald Ford announced his thing program for every American. You know what I'm talking about. The thing that you can't talk about. On this day, March 24th, 1976, Gerald Ford announced a program to have every American take a thing. For the big scare at the time, which ended up being nothing, essentially just like the CVD of our time. And just like our time, the thing actually caused more harm than you know, okay? I'm choosing my words carefully here, right? So you fill in the blanks. Okay, so it caused more harm, and but back then they weren't in the middle of a civil war, and the blue team wasn't using it as a political weapon, and the country wasn't as corrupt as it is now, and the media wasn't as wicked and lying and corrupt and captured. So anyway, the point is that after it was realized that it was causing, you know, some bad some bad things, right? They stopped the program. But also by that time, the fear had gone away because it was later in the year. And but anyway, and a lot of people suffered greatly, and there was lawsuits back then. You can't do that now, though. You can't sue the thing industry anymore. They're immune, which is why it's completely corrupt. But anyway, so they had common sense back then too. They were still able to reason, unlike the blue team today, with their hatred for conservatives and true Christians, which is spiritual at its root. Now, the thing is too, the announcement of so here's why God is pointing to Ford, and why Obama parallels Ford with being the only unelected president. It's also because of this parallel with Ford and his thing program. Now, in God's signs, the number 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist, the thing. That's why we have this exact 22 years connection right here. Because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist, essentially the mark of the Antichrist, is described in the Old Testament in the book of Ezekiel, which would have been a Tav mark. And the Tav letter is the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet and the 22nd letter. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, which is the 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. So long story short, the number 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. This is why we have this exact 22 years from Ford's announcement of his thing program for every American, just like Obama will announce a thing program for every American, but it will be by way of force, unwillingly, by way of compulsion. Okay, so it's exactly 22 years to the day that DAMAR Hamlin was born, and that, by the way, is an astounding confirmation of why he dropped onto the field, which you can't talk about, including him. He almost, in an interview, started talking about it, but bit his tongue and didn't go there. It's astounding that you can't talk about it. That's the world we live in, the dystopian world that Huxley wrote about, for example, right? Okay, so this 22 years, so I'll explain how this is, okay, well, we might as well, because DAMAR Hamlin was born exactly 317 months after Charles Hughes died on the field. So DAMAR Hamlin collapsed onto the field. And he was born exactly 317 months, which since that 3 times 17 equals 51, but also the 317th word, by way of compulsion, unwillingly, by force, after the only player to have ever died on the field, Charles Hughes. So God connected these two men profoundly, not only by way of compulsion symbolism here and the 51st vice president symbolism, but also what confirms it too is this 11 months followed by 42 months followed by 22 years to the day that Hamlin was born. This is so stunning that God did all this. All right? But there's more. There's more. There's more to Hamlin, and I'll explain in a minute. But let's go down here first. This 22 days, we have a second witness with this 222 days connection. So 22 years, sorry, is confirmed by it being preceded by 220 days, exactly to this date. Now, 220 obviously symbolizes 22, but it also symbolizes 9/11 because it was two towers that were 110 stories. And the two towers that were 110 stories are in fact symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. I'll explain. The two towers are symbolic of the two arms of chromosomes, which are affected by the mark of the Antichrist, which changes chromosomes, which makes it a spiritual abomination, which is why the flood judgment came in the book of Genesis after the chromosomes of people were corrupted, as it says in Genesis chapter 6. But there are two arms in a chromosome, okay, and there's a small arm and a long arm. The small arm in terminology, fill in the blank, the field of terminology, is called petite. It's labeled with a P for petite, which is meaning small in French. And that's why Philip Petit evaded security and walked across the Twin Towers exactly 70 weeks after they officially opened, on the date 4/4, which hints at the 44th president, in 1973, which was exactly 23 years after the 4/4 date in 1950 with Jerusalem and the UN, as I mentioned earlier, making it a pairing of 23 and 44 that confirms the signs and connections. But anyway, it's the World Trade Center as well, which hints back to the UN, right? Well, anyway, Philip Petit walked across the Twin Towers 70 weeks, and the most central prophecy in the Bible is the 70 weeks prophecy, and the 70th week is regarding this period of the end times and the Antichrist. Who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing which is symbolized by the two towers. And that's why, because of the chromosomes that are changed, and that's why it was Philip Petit. But also, him walking across a tightrope with his balancing pole with a man at the center is symbolic of a man crucified on a cross. And in the prophecy in Daniel chapter 9, after the 69 weeks, the Messiah is crucified, as it says. He is put to death, as the prophecy says. Which is why it is astounding that there are Jews that don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah and are still expecting the Messiah, but are not expecting him to be put to death when he arrives, but the text clearly says that. Which is why Paul talked about the mystery of the blindness of the Jews, because it's truly a mystery. But the reason for the mystery is that had the Jews not rejected Jesus, it wouldn't have forced the gospel to go around the world and give the whole world the opportunity to learn about the true God, the God of Israel, the God of the Bible, and Jesus, and the opportunity to repent. But now that the whole world has had the opportunity, the age can't end until the Jews also have their opportunity. Because as Jesus said, the end will come when the gospel will have gone around the world, and now it has. Even the remote tribes in the Amazon have heard the gospel, and everyone knows the year, 2024, is the number of years after Christ. And also, well, it's 2023 actually, as I'm making this, but he will return in 2024. But, and also, Jesus said he wouldn't return until the Jews call upon him by his name, which is described in Zechariah chapter 12, when they call upon the one that they have pierced and weep and mourn for the one that they have pierced. Another reason why it's a mystery of the blindness of the Jews. But God designed this mystery of the blindness of the Jews so that the whole world could have the opportunity to hear Christ. And then the age will end when they finally cry out for him to save them in their hour of desperation, when the world is aligned in the valley of Jehoshaphat, about to destroy Jerusalem. Okay. So that's why the 220. Okay. Long story short. But, and the Twin Towers were replaced by the One World Tower, I should say. And if you look at it correctly, it looks like a giant thing. It is a thing. It looks like a thing. The thing that is used to put the thing inside people, that's what the One World Tower looks like. And it replaced the two towers, which are symbolic of the chromosomes, which are changed by the thing. What does this 220 days connect to, though? It connects to this August 17th date in 1975, which was the date of the big news of Frank Church. You've heard of probably the Church Committee in the 1970s. This was a big deal back then. Unfortunately, this lesson has been largely forgotten, but it came out through the Senate hearings that the intelligence agencies had embedded within the media hundreds of their operatives influencing and controlling the media. And that was back in the 70s. That was back in the 1970s. Do you think that this government within a government that doesn't have any the intelligence agencies are a government unto themselves, right? And do you think they stopped that? No, of course they didn't. They said that they would, though, after the Church Committee. They said that they would stop doing that. But they didn't stop. The CIA, its job is to figure out how to topple governments that they don't like. That's their number one prerogative. That's what they do. But that apparatus, this institution has been turned on its own people in the Civil War, because we are literally in a civil war. Every 80 to 100 years, we have a literal civil war. The last one was the Republicans and Democrats hated each other at the time of President Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. And the Civil War before that was a civil war, and the Civil War before that was the Revolutionary War. There were the loyalists that it was a civil war, right? So we're in the middle of a civil war, this cyclical thing. And when that happens, do you not think that, unlike the 1970s, that it will be this institution will be used on its own people? Of course it will. When did it start? Well, it really got going after Brexit and Trump. That's when they said, well, you know what? We got to do it. We got to wage war on our own citizens. It's happening in the UK too, because of Brexit and everything. It's happening in all of the English-speaking countries. There's a war, and the intelligence agencies are a part of it. And anyway, like I'm saying, the thing is part of the Civil War. It's being used as a political weapon. But ultimately, it's a spiritual war, and Satan is using them through their hatred, blinding them of reality and truth. They're completely blinded by their hatred for Christ, ultimately. They need to repent. This is a warning for them. Hopefully they've made it this far into this video. If you're on the blue team and you're listening to this, you need to repent immediately. You are on your way to hell. The prediction being made in this video will prove that. And that's the purpose of this prediction, to sober you up. Okay, now, so anyway, this was the day that the big news broke about all this. He was on the Meet the Press, okay, talking about it. And back in the day, Meet the Press was the big place on the Sunday newscast that things like this would happen. The media is the same today, where there's more choice and more, the audience is fractured into all kinds of other outlets. But back in the day, Meet the Press was the big deal. And he went on the Meet the Press that day and revealed everything, and what the church committee was finding and all that. So this was that day important. And this was exactly 4 times 4 years after the earthquake in the 44th state hinting at the 44th president. This is known as the Yellowstone earthquake in 1959. Okay, and it is predicted that Yellowstone will erupt, and I'm sure this connects somehow, although I haven't done it in this diagram. But it is predicted that Yellowstone will erupt on February 24th, 2024. Okay, but that just is more confirmation of the prophetic significance of this date, is what it is. Okay, the church committee. Now, what I've just said, and the prediction proving it, will prove what I just said about the media and how it is infested with the intelligence agencies that are controlling information. It's propaganda. You are being lied to, right? Do you get it now? It's like, it's worse than Pravda in the Soviet Union. It's worse. Okay? Because at least in the latter decades of the Soviet era, they weren't under a totalitarian spell. They were during Stalinism, but people had largely come out of that hypnosis by the time that the Soviet Union fell. But that's not the case right now. The blue team is hypnotized, and they're in what's called a mass hypnosis. It's a totalitarian movement. Totalitarian movements are different than dictatorships. A totalitarian government is different than a dictatorship. A dictator rules by fear. Totalitarianism is when 30% of the population are in a mass hypnosis and are in favor of the totalitarianism. Okay, let's just put it that way. So let's move on. Now, this is 120 weeks exactly, which is 840 days. I gave you a connection involving that earlier, which is 2 times 2 times 30 weeks exactly, which hints at 223, the 48th prime number. This gets us to the date. Actually, I didn't even need to give you that, because this is the day that the 40th, Gerald Ford was appointed the 40th vice president. And this connects, as I'm explaining, to the date it is predicted that Barack Obama will be appointed the vice president. Again, these two presidents were the only presidents that never were elected vice president or president. But this 40th is amazing because in the account of Noah's flood, God gave Noah a period of time involving the number 120 years until the timing of the flood judgment. This is 120 weeks, a period of time. It's exactly 120 weeks. In the flood waters increased for 40 days. Therefore, this is amazing flood symbolism that confirms this. This is the second witness to this, right? But what also is a third witness is Gerald Ford became the president through Watergate, which is symbolic of the flood waters bursting forth from the deep, described bursting through the floodgates, in other words, symbolically in the flood judgment. So it couldn't be more profound that from the date of Ford's Thing program, it connects profoundly with this flood symbolism. And again, the flood happened because of the corruption of chromosomes. This connects with this other Ford date through flood symbolism. That's amazing. All right, now the day that Ford announced his Thing program for every American was exactly 9 months and 23 days after this date, and God frequently uses 9 months and 23 days connections to confirm the signs and connections, because again, the Antichrist became the president in 2009. He was the basketball president who wore jersey 23 and will become the president again in 2023. And that is just scratching the surface for why God pairs 9 and 23. I've explained it a number of other times in other videos though, and I think that's enough to confirm what I'm saying anyway. Okay, now what is this date? This is June 1st, 1975. This was the day that Gerald Ford stepped off of his Air Force airplane in Vienna, Austria, when he was there to meet with the leader of Egypt, which is symbolism for the king of Egypt, which in the Bible is a type symbolism for the Antichrist. Now, he stepped off of the plane on this date, But when he was stepping off of the plane, on the stairs down, he fell. His knee gave way, and he stumbled down the last couple of steps of the plane. And it was quite an embarrassing moment for him. All right, I'm interjecting into a video part that I already recorded because I forgot to mention a very important thing, which is that Gerald Ford's knee was a bum knee because of his playing football. Gerald Ford was known for being a football star in college. And in fact, he was drafted by the NFL, but turned it down in pursuit of a different career. So he is the football president, if you will, which is why we have in this diagram here these connections to football signs. It's to point to the football president, which is why in a second I'll explain how the birth of Dick Butkus was exactly 380 months before Gerald Ford became the 38th president. And that's why Dick Butkus later and DAMAR Hamlin and the 22 years connection to the birth of DAMAR Hamlin from Gerald Ford and his announcement of the Thing program. It's because Gerald Ford is the football president, and this is why he fell down the stairs. It's because of his football. And in fact, his falling down the stairs is in fact symbolism for the falling of the player on the football field that died, and also the falling of DAMAR Hamlin, which is why, again, the exact 22 years between Ford's program for the Thing and the birth of DAMAR Hamlin, who ultimately fell just like this man fell. So that's why Gerald Ford fell as he was disembarking the plane, because of a football knee. And speaking of these connections between the Chicago Bears and Gerald Ford in 1935 played on the collegiate all-star football team against the Chicago Bears in Soldier Field, historic Soldier Field in Chicago. This was back in the day when they would have these games for charity, and the Chicago Bears professional football team played against the collegiate all-stars, and Gerald Ford was a part of that. So we have this connection between the Chicago Bears and Gerald Ford as a football player. Also, Gerald Ford played his college football for the University of Michigan, and the University of Michigan retired Ford's number in his honor, number 48, which hints at the 48th president, who will also become the president after not having been elected vice president or president, just like Gerald Ford. Not only that, though, during this time, I believe on the same day, he fell 2 other times for a total of 3 times, which gave it a second and third witness to it, the prophetic significance. But he was going down the stairs, meeting with the king of Egypt, and Isaiah chapter 31 begins with woe to those who go down to Egypt, and then ends with the description of the Antichrist and his defeat by the Lord Jesus Christ at his second coming. The word step off, disembark, is the 576th word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance, which is why the day that he fell as he stepped off of the plane is exactly 576 months to the day that Joe Biden stumbled and fell on the stage in Colorado, the 38th state. Gerald Ford is the 38th president. This 576 months is exactly 48 years. Joe Biden will step down, allowing the 48th president to rise to power. Okay, so this is amazing. This stepping off, and it's being the word equivalent with the 576 months. The day that he fell after he stepped off of the plane, and I'll get to more about this in a second, actually, but we need to go this direction first, because again, we can go all kinds of ways. It's infinite. But this 9 months and 23 days connection is also in turn another 9 months and 23 days connection after Gerald Ford was appointed the president. That's amazing. And this was exactly, he was appointed the 38th president, and this was exactly 380 months after Dit Butkus was born. Dit Butkus, in other words, what I'm saying, as I've been explaining in this diagram, Dick Butkus and Gerald Ford connect to each other in these signs. And that's why Dick Butkus died 45 days before it is predicted that Barack Obama will become the vice president, being the only unelected vice president other than the 38th president, Gerald Ford. So it is astounding beyond words, therefore, that we have through all of this more confirmation of how Dit Butkus is tied to Gerald Ford. He was born exactly 380 months before Gerald Ford was appointed the 38th president. It's amazing. Now, the day that Ford was appointed after Watergate was exactly 7 times 7 years before the people in Lahaina, Maui jumped into the water due to the fire. As Peter said, the coming judgment would be symbolized by fire instead of water, and were rescued by boat in the water. And on the same day was this date here, this exact 7 times 7 months or years, the governor declared a state of emergency for the entire state of Hawaii, where Obama is from. And on this date too, there was a prophetic baseball game, which I explained in the Maui Fire videos. You need to watch that video. It's one video, sorry. It's very, very important, that video. Make sure you watch the Maui Fire video. Look for that video. The Church of Philadelphia, one of the 7 churches described in the book of Revelation, beat their opponent, the team from Washington, hence Washington, D.C., the location of the Antichrist. They beat them 7 runs to 0, or 0 to 7, and the winning pitcher, went to a record of 7-7, but he pitched a no-hitter. Okay, there's more to it, but I'm just scratching the surface for the sake of connecting things here for you. That confirmed the 7 times 7 years connection, the 7-7 record, and the score 7-0, and the Church of Philadelphia, one of the 7 churches, the only church that is said that will be raptured, by the way, from the Antichrist. And again, the number of time, a period of time that symbolizes the Antichrist in Bible prophecy is 1,260 days, which is what is hinted at with this 1 month and 26 days connection to the day that Dit Butkus died. Okay? And so that's amazing. So you have a straightforward connection from the birth of Dick Butkus to the death of Dick Butkus. Okay? Now, also, Dit Butkus was born with this 380-month connection to the appointment of the 38th president. And in the date of Butkus's death, we have this 80 sign. Again, this player that scored 3 touchdowns, his name equals 80, which hints at 38 and 380. The 38th president, the only president to never have been elected, which is then 45 days, as I explained earlier why that's the case, to the other time, the next time that the next president will be vice president without being elected. Okay, so that's amazing. So this is Antichrist symbolism, and we also have this connection. Again, the Antichrist is the basketball president who wore 23, and 2 divided by 3 equals 666. God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. This date here, the Maui sign, the fire in Maui is 23 plus 23 plus 23 days before the predicted fiery crash of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. All right? Now, okay, back to when Joe Biden stumbled on the stage in Colorado. He did so when he gave a commencement speech to the U.S. Air Force in Colorado Springs, Colorado, the 38th state. Hence the connection to the 38th president who stumbled and fell after disembarking his plane, his Air Force plane. And Kamala Harris is predicted to die in her Air Force 2 plane. Okay, so this was exactly 48 years, again, 576 months, and the 576th word means to disembark, to step off. He was stepping off of the stage, Biden, when he fell. He was disembarking the stage, actually. He didn't just stumble on the stage, he was stepping off of the stage. It's amazing. He was done his commencement speech and was disembarking. But this occurred exactly 7 years after Barack Obama gave the same speech at the same location, commencement speech. And in Bible prophecy, 7 years is symbolic of the end times, the 70th week. Okay, and right as he was delivering his speech, the Thunderbird's jet malfunctioned and crashed right after flying over him, literally. Just like it malfunctioned as it was flying over him, and then the pilot parachuted like right near Obama out of the plane. All right, and he was number 6 in his squad, and it was the same day as the other Blue Angels jet crashed in the 16th state, 4 times 4, 44th president, and it was number 6 in its squad, 666, and they were in the 6 squad formation. All right, and anyway, so the 7 years connects us back to Obama, same location. And that connects us, the reason why that's important, because on this day, Muhammad Ali died. And Muhammad Ali is known for his conscientious objection to the draft based on his religious beliefs, his religious convictions. Okay, so he is Muhammad Ali is symbolism for conscientious objection. Furthermore, the manner in which he died is very similar to how people died during the CVD thing. Anyway, I explained that in the Jim Brown video. Make sure you watch the Jim Brown video, because they got together for the Muhammad Ali Summit. Okay, and that's the thing about Muhammad Ali. It was the Cleveland Summit. It was known as the Cleveland Summit, and President Grover Cleveland was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms, just like Barack Obama. But Muhammad Ali died, who was known for the Cleveland Summit, and he died on the same day as the prophetic summit in Paris. Obama's Secretary of State was attending, John Kerry, and the day of the summit in Paris was the day of the peak of the once in 200 years flooding of the river in Paris that was destructive and flooded, for example, the Louvre Museum. And that was the peak of that. So it was flood symbolism. And from Adam to Noah's flood, it is 1,656 years. And don't get me wrong, it's only symbolism. I'm not a young earth person. I don't believe that the earth is 6,000 years old. But that's, regardless, that's the number we have in the Bible. That's symbolic of this flood. It's flood symbolism, in other words, 1,656. And Muhammad Ali died 1,656 days exactly before the approval of the thing on December 11th, 2020. Right here. Okay? You can't read it probably, but it's 1,656 days. And that's because Muhammad Ali's conscientious objection on the summits, the coincidences of the summits confirm the adding of this number of days. It's flood symbolism because of the Paris summit being flood symbolism on the same day as Muhammad Ali died, and he's known for the Cleveland summit. And we connect this number of days to the thing. This is God uses first. This is the symbolic beginning of the thing, right? Okay. Now, Joe Biden stumbled on the 38th state, connects to the 38th president, as I said, but the location of the stadium is 4900 Falcon Boulevard. Falcon Way Boulevard, I don't know, Falcon Boulevard, which hints at how Kamala Harris's plane will die in a plane crash. And 49 is 7 times 7. And Kamala Harris is the 49th vice president. And again, this prophetic sign of him stepping off of the plane and stumbling is prophetic of Kamala Harris's plane crash. And Joe Biden stumbling is prophetic of how he will replace Kamala Harris after her plane crash. But in the Bible, as I mentioned earlier, there have 3 sets of 7 and the walls of security collapsing. And 49 is 7 times 7. And we have the 7 years connection. We have the 7 years connection to the 7 times 7 in the 4900 address. And that connects with the 3 sets of 7 days to the prophetic sign of the Titanic sub, which was the day that the wreckage was discovered at the end of the 4 days of oxygen for the 5 people. Another hint at 54. That's another story. Make sure you watch the Titanic sub video, one of the most important videos on this channel, and I mean that sincerely. It contains about 50 videos worth of prophetic information all in one. All right? It is arguably the climax of God's signs in a way, the Titanic sub sign. So make sure you learn about it. And I made a long video about it. Make sure you watch it. But anyway, the day of the wreckage of the sub, it was due to an implosion, which hints at the crash of Kamala Harris's plane due to the explosion of her engine, due to a bird strike, right? And the date she will crash on 10/17 hints at 117. And as I said, she will crash in St. Louis, where the peak of the eclipse was at 1:17 p.m. And 117, as I mentioned, symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. So that's why we have the 117 days onward from the Titanic sub sign. Okay, okay, I think we've done the bottom half of this diagram now. Now let's just finish up with DAMAR HAMLIN. DAMAR HAMLIN was born in this date exactly 22 years after Ford announced the Thing program, and we all know by now, unless we are brainwashed, why DAMAR HAMLIN collapsed onto the field. And again, it was exactly 317 months after the only other player to collapse on the field and who died on the field. Okay? And again, the 317 by way of compulsion, unwillingly, by force. DAMAR HAMLIN took the thing by compulsion. We all know that too. There was no reason for him to have taken it. A healthy young man, we all know that. But because of the hysteria, he was forced to take it by compulsion. So, and he died at the age of 24, but on his 24th birthday, we have this prophetic sign right here, which was March 24th, 2022. And we have this asteroid sign, which connects with exactly 6 + 6 + 6 months, hinting at the Antichrist 666, to what I mentioned earlier, the day that the asteroid was dropped off by the probe, the first time ever that an asteroid piece of it has come to Earth. The first time that NASA went and retrieved a piece of asteroid and brought it back to Earth. Okay, so what happened on this day was that asteroid BO76 flew close to Earth. Flew by Earth, okay? BO hints at Barack Obama. And this BO asteroid, the name of the asteroid, this sign occurred exactly 60 years and 6 months and 6 weeks and 6 days after the birth of Barack Obama. And as I will explain in a minute, it in turn connects with a 6 + 6 + 6 months connection. And this 6 + 6 + 6 months connection is confirmed with the fact that this date in this BO76 asteroid is 60 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days after Barack Obama's birth, the Antichrist. 76 hints at 13. 7 + 6 = 13. And again, the dolphins are all about the 13. And again, 13 is Antichrist symbolism from the Bible. So that's astounding too. But it also hints at 7 times 6, which equals 42. And again, the 42 months is the period of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, which, by the way, we were already well inside, which began technically, symbolically, on May 2nd, 2021, when the Dragon capsule splashed down to Earth. But I explained that in other videos. Now, because the dragon at the beginning of the 42 months in Revelation chapter 12 is thrown down from heaven to earth. So, but also there were quote unquote about 75 firefighters on this day that were putting out a fire in the high place, in the upper part of the stadium, in Mile High Stadium in Denver, America's highest city. And Bama in Hebrew means high place. It's the 38th state, first of all, which hints at the 38th president who was never elected. And it's the highest place in America, which is symbolic because that's for one reason why Obama chose to have his Democrat nomination acceptance speech in 2008 in the Denver Mile High Stadium. The name of the stadium itself hints at high place. It's called Mile High Stadium. So in Mile High Stadium, there was a fire in the upper part of the stadium with quote unquote about 75 firefighters, which I think means that there were 76 firefighters, which confirms BO 76. But the stadium is 850 feet above sea level. I forget if it's the stadium or Denver itself. Maybe it's Denver, but 850 is hinting at the 85 Bears, which hints at the Miami Dolphins, right? And the number 13. 8 plus 5 equals 13, as does 7 plus 6. So more confirmation of all of this. The fire occurred near the number 47 because a player's number, if it's retired, will be put on the side of the stadium. And it was right in the area of number 47. Player number 47 for the Denver Broncos is currently the general manager of the San Francisco 49ers. And Pope Francis, which is what San Francisco hints at, is the first of the two antichrists. 49ers, well, the 49th vice president, but the 47th president will also be Michelle Obama, who will appoint Barack Obama the 51st vice president. But there's more reason for why 47 in here, because this date here, okay, it connects with 6 plus 6 plus 6 months, but September 24th, 2023 is 9 months and 11 days after this prophetic date, which has a ton of connections to Michelle Obama, who will be the 47th president, which I won't explain in this video. I'll just say that. But this was the day of a White House sign, which was the day on the White House lawn. They had a ceremony or a big event for the signing of Biden of the Defense of Gay Marriage Act or something like that. It was a bill or a law for defending gay marriage. It was a big deal. Cyndi Lauper was there. She sang True Colors, right? But that was symbolism for the true colors of the Antichrist, which will fool most people. But this was also the day that the GOAT, greatest of all time, GOAT is symbolic of the Antichrist, of college football coaching, died, and he was named Coach of the Year nationally twice and 3 times for his conference, which hints at 23. And that pairs with this 23 days connection right here, as I will now explain. Oh, before we move on, Damar Hamlin, the day that he collapsed on the field, right here, January 3rd, I can barely read it myself. So anyway, January 3rd was 9 months and 11 days after the BO 76 asteroid. Okay, so that was necessary. I needed to say that first. So from his birth, we have 24 years. He died at 24. Oh, and 24 is confirmed because it's the 24th of the month, connected with the 24th of the month, right? There's a term for that. When your birthday, the number of years is the day of the month. But anyway, it's also a reflection of 42, which is symbolic of which is the number that symbolizes the Antichrist. So from Ford's announcement for the Thing program, we have 22 years, and 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist, to the birth of Damar Hamlin, which is the big sign that God used to communicate what the mark of the Antichrist is, right? To warn about to warn about the mark of the Antichrist, and it's confirmed through the 22 years connection, and we get another 24 years to the date that we have the asteroid sign, which then connects with 9 months and 11 days to the date that he collapsed, which is a falling sign, which hints at the fall, which is what the asteroid sign hints at. It hints at the falling of the asteroid. The signs overlap. The themes and the signs overlap. And so and the 9 months and 11 days, of course, is prophetic because of the 9/11 judgment, right? Furthermore, in the high place, the planes that struck the towers in the high place. All right, just as the high place of the fire in Denver and the asteroid in the high place in the sky. Well, also 276 is the 23rd triangular number. 276 is a number in the Bible, one of 3 unusually specific numbers, and it regards the number of people in a shipwreck, which is ultimately what will be Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash. It'll be a type of shipwreck. And so this 23rd triangular number pairs, I'm sure, you know what, there's just so much information. I can't remember all that happened on this date. But I do know this, by the way. The part of the sign was that all of the Buffalo Bills players, it was the Buffalo Bills. Remember I mentioned earlier the Buffalo Bills here? He played for the Buffalo Bills when he collapsed. But if you recall, all of the players, after he fell on the field and was put in the ambulance, gathered together on the field and kneeled, except for number 33. And DAMAR HAMLIN is number 3. This was the 3rd of the month. And it was the 30th anniversary of what is known in NFL history as the comeback game, the biggest comeback in NFL history, which was when the Buffalo Bills made their comeback in the playoffs. I forget who they were playing, but it was exactly 30 years earlier. Like literally, I think it was just off by a day. Maybe it was exactly 30 years, but it doesn't matter. It was 30 years, and it's player number 3, and player 33 didn't kneel as everyone else was kneeling, and that player's name is Neil. That's his surname. You can see it in the images. Player 33 isn't kneeling, and his name is Neil, which of course was all symbolism for kneeling to Satan, which is what one does symbolically when they take the mark of the Antichrist, by way of compulsion, unwillingly, and by force. Okay? So that was amazing. And so, anyway, we have this connects with 12 days, which is 2 times 2 times 3 days, which hints at, 223, the 48th prime number. And also, as I mentioned earlier, it's confirmed with the player 1 pass to player 2, the first score of the game, a big play. Hints at the number 12, which gets us to the date that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. All right? So there's DAMAR HAMLIN for you. This is the true reason for the collapse of DAMAR HAMLIN. God used it to point back to the announcement of the Thing program by Gerald Ford in order to identify it as the mark of the Antichrist. The reason why DAMAR HAMLIN collapsed. Case closed. By the way, when this prediction comes to pass, it will prove that the Thing is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It does not need an additional something, such as an additional technology, to go with it, or a false form of religious worship, such as the worship of a statue. Confusion from Bible prophecy that people have. Or a supposed new dispensational age, which is heretical doctrine. Supposedly after all the Christians will be raptured. And furthermore, God or Jesus said that he's coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. And I know from God's signs what it is. And one of the things that it is the dispensationalism doctrine, which means that those quote unquote Christians that have taken it because they thought that it couldn't be it because the rapture hasn't happened, it is judgment for their doctrine. Okay? Now, make sure you watch the 23 church signs video on this channel. The church committee, but speaking of Frank Church, it's all, the theme of God's signs is judgment, warning for the church. Arguably the most important video on his channel is the 23 church signs, especially if you are a Christian. Make sure you find that video and watch it. All right, now, as I was saying, we have the 9 months and 11 days connection back to this White House sign and the air raid coach, which hints at the air raid, the bird strike of Kamala Harris's plane crash. The coach was known for his revolutionary style of coaching and the air raid offense, okay? So anyway, that was 23 days, which is confirmed by the 23 here, and also confirmed by the number 9 in this sign here on November 20th, 2022. This was the day of the record, and God uses records in his signs. This was the day that the record 9th, this player scored his 9th record return touchdown. Okay, off a kickoff. So a return touchdown is when the ball is kicked off to begin a half or something, right? To begin the game. And he returns it for a touchdown. It was 103 yards touchdown, which probably was another record, actually, which means he caught it in the end zone and ran it back 103 yards because a football field is 100 yards. And he made the score with the kickoff return. He made the score total 13. Okay? And if I recall, he outran player number 13, but I can't be sure about that. But regardless, there's enough 13s there to confirm this, because God pairs 9 and 13 together. A 9 times 13 equals 117, which I explained earlier is the number that symbolizes the Antichrist. Make sure you watch that other video that I mentioned. So 9 times 13, God pairs 9 and 13 together for that purpose, but also 9 pairs with 23, as I explained. So that's confirmation of this 23 days connection. Now, why is this important? Well, the name of the player is Marcus Mariota, which hints at the mark of the Antichrist. And that's why it's exactly 130 months. This 9th return is 130 months because 9 times 13 equals 117, which symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. It's exactly 130 months after Barack Obama gave a speech at Disneyland, okay, which hints at the magic kingdom, which is symbolic of the kingdom that Satan, the dragon, is thrown out of at the beginning of the end times in Revelation chapter 12. Which, by the way, is another reason for the 12 over here. Because when she falls from the sky in her plane crash, it will symbolize when Satan and the dragon and his angels are thrown down from heaven to earth. Because the first heaven is the sky, the second heaven is outer space, and the third heaven is heaven. Okay, so now Obama also admitted to being kicked out of booted out of the magic kingdom as a teenager. And the day that he admitted that, which is symbolic, of course, of the dragon being booted out of the kingdom at the beginning of Revelation chapter 12, at the beginning of the end times. But he said that, he admitted this 6 times 6 times 6 days before the Mall of America sign, which was when the kid named Landon was thrown from the 3rd floor, hinting at the 3rd heaven, and landed next to the store named Michael Kors, and the dragon is thrown from heaven to earth by the angel Michael, next to the escalator, Jacob's ladder to heaven. But Michael Landon landed, and it was all about, so anyway, he recovered miraculously, but Mall of America gave it national symbolism. Anyway, Obama was booted out of the Magic Kingdom. He gave a speech at the Magic Kingdom 130 months exactly before this date. Now, the date here in the sign is actually 2 dates because there was the shooting that went from the 19th into the 20th. It was late at night. And the shooting was all about the time of the shooting because the mass shooter went into the gay nightclub in the 38th state, right? Colorado Springs, where actually Biden fell. Okay, now the massacre took place through the midnight hour, so it went from the 19th into the 20th. And God designed that because he aligned, for other reasons, Obama's speech to be not on the 20th of the month, but on the 19th. But I won't get into other reasons here because it's an infinite web, right? And anyway, that ties into the 20th, which is the day of the Marcus Mariota sign. Well, the big story regarding this mass shooting was this guy here, who was the bartender, and he was the guy in the news stories because he was relaying to the media what happened inside the club during the shooting and how he was hiding and all that. And he also gave testimony in Congress, from what I recall. So this guy is important. This guy, God was, in other words, pointing to this guy in the story. He is the guy of the story, more so than even the shooter. Okay, the shooter was a gay man, by the way. It wasn't a hate crime. But anyway, the guy that God is pointing to here, his name is Nicholas. And God is using men named Nick to point to the Nicolaitan doctrine of the vast majority of Christians today, which is explained in the 23 church signs video. Obviously, you need to watch that, right? When the prediction comes to pass, you'll know that. It's very serious. You need to watch that video. So, and that's why we have Nicholas Anderson on the day of the Marcus Mariota sign. All right, now I need to make a correction here. Marcus Mariota is the quarterback for the team that this player plays on, the player that returned a record 9th kickoff return for a touchdown in his career. The team is the Atlanta Falcons, and the Falcons are a team that God has used in other signs to hint at the coming bird strike of Kamala Harris's airplane. But what I didn't mention earlier is that, and I forgot, is that the Falcons were playing the Chicago Bears in this game. Anyway, the reason why Marcus Mariota is part of this sign is because it connects with 23 days, which pairs with the 9th return to this date here. And this is the day of the Marcus Mariota quarterback sign. On this date, this was what I call a super date for prophetic signs. There were a number of prophetic signs, including the death of the air raid coach, which connects with the Falcons, right? The air raid coach hints at the air raid of the bird strike on Kamala Harris's airplane. But one of the signs on this date was the quarterback who bolted. He took off from a practice for the Atlanta Falcons, and no one knew when the quarterback would be returning or if he would be returning. He was not having a good season. He was having, I think they were saying, personal issues, and they didn't know when or if the quarterback was returning. He just bolted, which is very, very strange. A professional football player to be doing that, especially a star player, you could say, especially because of that. But for any NFL player to just bolt and not, but he's the quarterback. So how do you just bolt? But anyway, so the point is the symbolic return symbolism is hinting at the return of the Antichrist, the former president who will become the president again after a bird strike of an airplane. And this return sign involving this quarterback connected to this date here involving the same professional team, the Falcons, on the day of the return sign of Bob Iger, the CEO for Disney, the announcement that he was returning. The organization, the coach, announced that the quarterback had bolted and they didn't know when he was returning. And this is 23 days after this return sign of the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger. Both of these return signs hinting at the return of the Antichrist and for another presidency, and ultimately also hinting at the return of Lord Jesus Christ. Now, it's exactly 336 weeks back, which hints at the 336th word of the Greek concordance, which is the word put to death, to murder, to the day of the other mass shooting in the Orlando Gate nightclub that killed 50 people on Pentecost, which means 50th day, which was 11 months and 17 days, which hits at 1,117, the Hebrew word meaning Bama, which was June 26th, 2015, the day that gay marriage was made legal by the Supreme Court, on the same day that Obama lit up the White House in rainbow colors. And this in turn was 9 months and 23 days after this September 4th, 2014 date, which was the day that Joan Rivers died. And she was famous shortly before her death, saying that Barack Obama was the first gay president, which was a fact. Which is a fact. Okay, and let's see, just to give you some confirmation of the prophetic significance of the death of the air raid coach, 1,109 weeks, which hints at 9/11, after 9/11 and the plane crashes, 6 times 6 times 6 weeks after the plane crash on the Highway 101, at the same time as the rainbow over Fenway Park, at the beginning of the 2018 World Series, extremely prophetic, and 230 weeks exactly after 40 people were rescued in the flooding around Washington, D.C., including on the prophetic George Washington Parkway, the 40 rescue, on the date 7/17, which hints at flood, because the flood was said to have increased for 40 days in Genesis 7:17. 230 hints at 23, and the coach, second and third coach of the year, was 23, as I mentioned. Also, the day of the, the reason for the Disney sign here and the connection is because this was the day that Disney announced that its old CEO was making a comeback. The CEO stepped down, and the old CEO, let me just get his name, Bob Iger, it was announced on this day that Disney's old CEO was making a comeback and would be the CEO of Disney again, which obviously hints at the comeback of Barack Obama with this connection to the Magic Kingdom. So I failed. This was the return sign. It was a kick return. I totally missed explaining earlier the reason for all of this. Okay. This return ninth kick, 9 being the number that symbolizes God's judgment, this record ninth return for this player was on the same day of the return of the CEO of Disney, which hints at the Antichrist kingdom, Magic Kingdom, and the return of the Antichrist, Barack Obama, which will be exactly 4 times 4 plus 4 months after this date and this shooting, when he will be appointed the 51st vice president. And by the way, again, mass shootings are symbolic of things coming out of guns and going into people, are symbolic of the thing that comes out of the thing and goes into people. And he will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which is again why he will be the 51st vice president, because it hints at 3 times 17 and 317 by way of compulsion, unwillingly, by force. So the reason why I wanted to get into all of this really is because I wanted to get into a video, this amazing prophetic return of the Disney CEO sign. And I forgot to mention it earlier, but now it's clear, right? So, okay. Now, one thing I didn't realize is that the total score in this game here, added up to 60. It was 40 to 20. And the total, and the score, the 70 points here was the record score here. And so that hints at 70 plus 40 plus 20 equals 130, which hints at 13, which is just another confirmation of the prophetic significance between the Bears and the Dolphins and the number 13. One more thing to add here is that I just watched the end of the game, the highlights of the game, the end of the Thursday night football game involving the Bears. And there were 2 instances of quite interesting 3 sets of 7. The last spectacular touchdown scored by this player that had the night of his life, or the night of his career, 230 yards, an astounding number of yards, but also astounding because of the prophetic number, 230, which hints at 23. But again, so this player, he scored the last touchdown, and it was a 56-yard touchdown. All right, and if you watch the highlights, it's an interesting play because of the defensive move, etc. Anyway, 56 is a very prophetic number that hints at 3 sets of 7, because it is 7 plus 7 times 7. Also, the last field goal, the last score of the game, and God uses, firsts and lasts for symbolism. And the last field goal that made the final score 40-20 was a 37-yard field goal with the score at 37. Another symbolic, or 2 symbolic 3 sets of 7, because the number 37 hints at 3 sets of 7. The 37-yard field goal with the score at 37. All of this was for the purpose of confirming the sign involving President Trump when he spoke about his border wall of security on this day, and specifically regarding the number of miles of fence, of border wall of security, that he had overseen built. Again, it confirmed the 45 days, which was confirmed through the 450 miles that the news media was speaking about, and he corrected them by saying it was 560, and again, that hints at 56 and 3 sets of 7. So we have in the game a 56-yard touchdown pass, a major play in the game, on the same day that Trump spoke about 560 yards of miles of fence. No kidding. So the 56 yards is a measurement of distance, as is the 560 miles. That's absolutely stunning. And it comes right before the 37-yard field goal that made this from 37 points. That was the score that followed the 56-yard field goal. This is stunning confirmation of the tie connection between this football game and President Trump on this date, God's trumpet. And again, the walls of security collapsed on Jericho after the Israelites blew trumpets. All right, it was just realized that Damar Hamlin's fall is exactly 41 weeks before it is predicted that Kamala Harris will fall from the sky. It could even be that Hamlin hints at Harris. Now, the thing is, 41 is the 13th prime number. And the number 13 is important, as I have explained already in this video. And again, it is symbolic of the Antichrist in the Bible. And the date that he fell is the date 1-3, which hints at 13. And actually also, so it just goes off into infinity. This actually connects to the date 1-3 in 2020 when the missile fell from the sky and killed the Persian general. And one reason why the Trump's missile killed the General Soleimani, and one reason why the number 13 is symbolic of the Antichrist is because of the book of Esther in the Bible, when it describes the Jews in Persia being persecuted by a type for the Antichrist, Haman, who persecuted the Jews on the 13th days of the month in the calendar. Anyway, that connects with exactly 3 years, and Damar Hamlin's number is 3, and it is a missile falling from the sky. Kamala Harris will fall from the sky, and Damar Hamlin fell, and as I explained earlier, Damar Hamlin's fall is 9 months and 11 days after this near-Earth asteroid passed by. And what I just found is that the full name of this asteroid is 2013 BO76. That's right. The reason why Damar Hamlin fell on the date 1-3 is that it hints at this asteroid. And Damar Hamlin's fall was exactly 150 weeks, which is 3 times 50 weeks, which hints at 35, highway to holiness, as I explained earlier. And the flood judgment, the flood lasted for 150 days, and so that's another reason for 150 weeks. And it gets us back to the date that symbolizes the flood, February 17th, because the flood began in the account in Genesis on the 17th day of the second month, for which the date February 17 symbolizes. On that date, we had a prophetic crash. In fact, it was from a high place, because the car flipped up into the air at the Daytona 500 and crashed in a fiery crash. That car was driven by, the winner of the race as a result of the crash was Denny Hamlin. And that connects with exactly 150 weeks from a flood symbolic sign, and 150 weeks is symbolic of the flood, a symbolic date, I should say, February 17th. It gets us to the day that Hamlin fell. And the car that flipped into the air, the driver's name was Ryan Newman, and like Damar Hamlin, he had to go to the hospital for a few days. And, anyway, the flip of the car into the air and the fiery crash is, of course, also hinting at the fiery crash of Kamala Harris in her airplane. But it is also hinting at the coming asteroid hit and the eruption of Yellowstone volcano and the eruption on the sun. And so anyway, I'm going to leave it at that because this is requiring another video, as you can start to see. Furthermore, the Daytona 500 in 2017 was a Trump sign and it was an Obama sign, and it connects with car number 3, Dale Earnhardt, who also died at a Daytona 500 race. And the Ryan Newman driver survived his crash because of the regulations that were made after Dale Earnhardt's death. But anyway, he drove famously the car number 3, and Damar Hamlin is number 3. And so anyway, it goes on and on. But I just wanted to add this, is that this asteroid is asteroid 2013, and it connects with 9 months and 11 days to the date 1-3, which hints at 13, and then exactly 41 weeks to the predicted date that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, and 41 is the 13th prime number. And so, that is astounding. The fall of Damar Hamlin is also a prophetic sign that is pointing to or confirming the date that Harris will fall from the sky in a fiery crash. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. you need to switch to the BitChute.com or the Odyssey.com channel. And do it now in case you aren't able to later.